Hi, I'm Anna, and welcome back to the D1 Audible Cheat Sheets, where we continue with Chapter 13. So, the fruit is in the winery, and now the winemaker has to decide what kind of contact they want between juice and solids, how much structure they want, how much risk they can tolerate, and how much control they need to deliver the intended style at the intended price. We start with destemming because stems are not neutral. Stems contain tannins, and those tannins can be extracted if stems stay in contact with juice or wine. In white wines, stem tannin is usually unwanted. In reds, stem tannin can be either a tool or a problem. If stems aren't ripe, they can give bitter tannins and green flavors. So, destemming is a default for most whites and many reds, and machine harvested grapes are effectively already destemmed because berries are shaken off. Destemmers typically use blades in a rotating drum to separate berries from stems. It's common globally because it's efficient and gives a consistent starting point. But there are important exceptions. Some red fermentations deliberately include whole bunches, classic for Pinot Noir in Burgundy and many other Pinot regions. And carbonic maceration needs whole bunches, like in Beaujolais. And for high quality sparkling, whole bunches are often required for whole bunch pressing, which is part of how you protect juice quality and manage phenolic pickup. Now, crushing. Crushing is simply applying enough pressure to break skins and release juice for fermentation. It is not pressing. And the caution is always the same: crush gently enough not to crush seeds, because seed tannin can bring bitterness. Historically, feet did this beautifully: pressure with sensitivity. Today, many wineries use combined destemmer crushers, which pushes efficiency, but it also means that sorting can be limited to whole bunch level because once berries are flowing, the game changes. Once grapes are crushed, we're dealing with must: juice, pulp, skins, seeds. And the word must shifts meaning depending on color. For whites, must may refer to clarified juice that will ferment after pressing and settling. In general, must is the substance that will ferment. Then comes pressing, and pressing decisions are deeply style defining. In white winemaking, grapes are almost always pressed early to separate juice from skins before fermentation. In red winemaking, grapes are usually fermented on skin and pressed later, after the desired maceration time or at the end of fermentation. Soft pressing matters in both cases. For whites, you want juice pulled without excessive phenolics and solids. Tannins are not wanted in most white styles. For reds, especially post fermentation pressing, you need to avoid extracting harsh tannins and bitterness from seeds and skins that have been softened by time in alcohol. Press choice is an exam favorite for a reason. A pneumatic press, also called an airbag press, is the modern workhorse. Grapes go into a cylindrical cage, a bladder inflates and pushes fruit against grates, and the juice runs off. The winemaker can program pressure stages: gentler early fractions, stronger later fractions, creating different components for blending. These pressures can also be flushed with inert gas to reduce oxidation. They're common in medium to large wineries that can afford the investment. A basket press is older and still beloved in some places. Grapes sit in a vertical basket, pressure comes from above, juice runs through gaps and is collected. Basket presses aren't sealed, so you can't flush them with inert gas, and oxygen exposure is harder to control. Some winemakers believe they are gentler, but they are labor intensive, small in capacity, and best suited to small premium focused wineries. There are other presses: horizontal screw presses and continuous presses. Continuous presses can process large volumes quickly, And that's exactly why they appear in high volume, inexpensive wine production. But they tend to be less gentle and therefore less aligned with premium quality aims. Modern presses are computerized, and the key truth is that pressing is a quality versus yield conversation. Less pressure and gentler cycles can mean better juice but less volume. Longer cycles can extract more aroma, flavor, and tannin, which may be desirable or may be damaging depending on the style. After pressing, what's left is pomace, the skins, seeds, and solids. Now we move into must adjustments. And I want you to hear this as balance management, not cheating. Adjustments exist because not every vintage gives perfect alignment of sugar ripeness, acid ripeness, tannin ripeness, and flavor ripeness. Sometimes weather forces compromises. Adjustments are tools to correct the consequences of those compromises within legal limits, and they also shape style. In cool climates, enrichment is common. In EU language, enrichment can mean adding dry sugar, grape must, grape concentrate, rectified concentrated grape must or RCGM, or using concentration techniques like reverse osmosis, vacuum extraction, or chilling. Adding dry sugar is chaptalization. It's typically done once fermentation is underway because active yeast handle the extra sugar better. The EU controls these practices by zones. In the coolest areas, enrichment allowances are higher. In the warmer areas, enrichment is limited. The detail that matters for students is the logic. Enrichment is a response to insufficient natural sugar accumulation. On the flip side, in warmer regions, sugar can accumulate quickly and alcohol can run high. Some places allow marginal alcohol reduction by adding water to the must, but that also dilutes flavors and acids, so it's not a perfect solution and it's not universally legal. Then there's acidification, a routine tool in warm climates where malic acid drops dramatically as fruit ripens. Without acidification, wines can lack freshness and pH can rise, making microbial stability harder and SO2 less effective. Tartaric acid is the standard addition. Malic is less used because it can be converted in malolactic conversion. Lactic may be used post MLF because it can taste less harsh. Timing matters. Many winemakers prefer acidifying before fermentation because they want the benefits of lower pH early and feel it integrates better. But they must anticipate that winemaking processes like MLF and tartrate stabilization can change total acidity and pH later. In the EU, legal zones also govern acidification. And a key rule students should remember: within the EU, winemakers are not allowed both to chaptalize and to acidify must. The intent is to avoid stretching wines with both additions. Excuse me. In cool climates, the reverse can be needed: de-acidification. That can be done with calcium carbonate or potassium carbonate, lowering acidity via tartrate precipitation. There's also ion exchange, a high tech option that requires investment and legality checks. Winemakers can also add tannins, usually powdered tannins, for clarifying must, stabilizing red color, and adjusting mouthfeel, either pre fermentation or before maturation. Now we come to the engine room: alcoholic fermentation. Yeast converts sugar into ethanol and carbon dioxide, producing heat. That heat is not a footnote. It can derail fermentation if not controlled. Yeast aren't just alcohol factories, they shape aromas. They create or release volatile acidity in small amounts, produce tiny amounts of natural SO2, release aromas from precursors like thiols and terpenes, produce esters that give fruity notes, and can also produce undesirable reductive sulfur compounds if stressed. They also generate glycerol, which contributes to body. The dominant species in winemaking is Saccharomyces cerevisiae because it tolerates acidity, rising alcohol, and is relatively SO2 resistant, fermenting reliably to dryness. The strategic choice is often ambient yeast versus cultured yeast. Ambient yeast fermentation include multiple species. They can add complexity, cost nothing, and can be part of the story of place. But they can start slowly, which increases risk. Volatile acidity can build, spoilage organisms can gain ground, and stuck fermentation risk rises. Consistency is harder, which matters for larger wineries and brand reliability. Cultured yeasts are selected strains, often Saccharomyces cerevisiae, used for reliability and style control. Winemakers may cool must or add SO2 to suppress ambient populations, then inoculate. Cultured yeasts ferment quickly and cleanly, help deliver consistency, and can be selected for stylistic aims neutral for sparkling base, aromatic boost for Sauvignon Blanc, and so on. Some wines may use other species like Saccharomyces baianus for high potential alcohol must or sparkling referments. The trade off is cost and the critique that cultured yeast can lead to a certain sameness of expression when used everywhere. Yeast need oxygen early to multiply, and they need nutrients. Low nitrogen stresses yeast, increasing risk of reductive aromas like rotten egg, and can contribute to stuck ferments. Nutrients like diammonium phosphate or thiamine can be used. Temperature is the other major stylistic lever. Cool ferments, roughly in the 12 to 16 degrees Celsius range, tend to preserve esters and fruitiness in whites and rosés. Mid-range 17 to 25 degrees Celsius is common across many styles, supporting fruit retention in easy drinking reds and giving flexibility for whites. Warmer 26 to 32 degrees Celsius is used for reds where extraction of color and tannin is desired, though fruity aromas can be reduced. Above about 35 degrees Celsius, yeast struggle and fermentation can slow or stop, raising stuck fermentation risk. Modern wineries usually have temperature control via jackets or inserts using water or glycol managed by computer. And in some processes, like pumping over, can also help release heat. Then, fermentation vessels. Stainless steel is the modern standard for hygiene and control. Concrete is back in fashion for thermal inertia, and in some egg shaped vessels, convection currents that may keep lees moving, and wood remains in use in some places for tradition, heat retention, and small oxygen ingress, with the hygiene warning that wood pores can harbor microbes. Plastic is light and flexible but oxygen permeable and harder to temperature control. Terracotta appears in amphora, kivri, tinaja forms, bringing historical resonance and often small batch practice. After alcoholic fermentation comes malolactic conversion, the conversion of malic acid to lactic acid plus carbon dioxide by lactic acid bacteria, producing heat. It's often called malolactic fermentation, though it's bacteria driven. Conditions that encourage malolactic conversion around 18 to 22 degrees Celsius, moderate pH around 3.3 to 3.5, and low total SO2. Conditions that inhibit malolactic conversion below 15 degrees Celsius, low pH, moderate SO2. Winemakers can inoculate with cultured bacteria to control timing and completion. If they want to prevent it, they can use lysozyme to kill lactic acid bacteria, isolate batches to prevent spread, or filter bacteria out. Red wines routinely go through malolactic conversion. In whites, it's a stylistic decision. Outcomes include reduced acidity and higher pH, giving a softer feel. Some color loss in reds, usually not a concern except in very pale reds. Increased microbial stability in the sense that you reduce the risk of MLF happening later in bottle. But higher pH also makes wines more vulnerable to spoilage. Flavor shifts can include slight fruit loss and buttery notes, and volatile acidity increases. Some producers run MLF in barrel to integrate flavors and allow least stirring simultaneously. But it's more labor and monitoring because barrels vary in temperature and kinetics. Some encourage MLF during alcoholic fermentation to shorten production time, and in some studies, preserve fruitiness by reducing the gap where wines sit vulnerable. Finally, post fermentation adjustments. Ideally, these are small because big moves post ferment can distort balance. Acidity and tannins can be adjusted similarly to must stage, but restraint is the aim. Sweetening decisions sit in the residual sugar chapter, but here we acknowledge that adjustments can still happen. And at the very end of this excerpt, the chapter begins to open the door to things like alcohol removal and color adjustments, including the reality that some high volume producers may use coloring agents like mega purple where legal, a reminder that style, price, and legislation are always braided together. And so that concludes the end of this episode 13b and the end of chapter 13 in the textbook, the core chain from fruit to fermentation to stability. I do hope this helps with your exam prep, and I'll see you in the next episode.